The desert sun sank behind jagged mesas as Gwen Mallory stood abandoned at Desert Key Station, her life's belongings stolen and her promised job vanished like a mirage. At 50, with grown children and a divorce still fresh in her mind, this wasn't how her new chapter was supposed to begin. The station's ancient bench offered little comfort against the coming night chill. Just as tears threatened, a weathered pickup truck rattled to a stop. Behind the wheel sat Nash Greyhawk, his face carved by time and wisdom, eyes reflecting 7 decades of Apache resilience. He extended a thermos of fragrant cedar tea and spoke words that would change everything. Sometimes the Creator sends us exactly where we need to be, even when it feels like we've been left behind. Could ancient wisdom and unexpected connection heal 2 souls wounded by life's disappointments? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Gwen clutched the thermos of cedar tea, its warmth the only comfort in this desert twilight. 3 hours ago, she'd stepped off the train with a suitcase and a promise. Now she had neither. You said something about a job that disappeared. Nash Greyhawk's voice was a low rumble, as weathered as the hills behind them. Margaret Yazzie, I was supposed to be her live-in nurse. Gwen pushed a strand of silver-streaked hair behind her ear. The station manager told me she passed away 2 days ago. Nobody bothered to call me. Nash nodded, his leathery face impassive in the fading light. Margaret was my second cousin, a good woman. I'm sorry for your loss. The words came automatically after 20 years of nursing. I should have asked first, did you know her well? Well enough to know she wouldn't want anyone stranded because of her. Nash gestured to his truck, an ancient Ford with more rust than paint. There's no hotel in Desert Key. No bus until morning. Gwen hesitated. 24 hours ago, she'd been in her daughter's apartment in Chicago, enduring last-minute warnings about traveling alone. Her son had texted links to articles about crimes against women. Yet here she was, considering climbing into a stranger's truck in a town that was little more than a whistle-stop. I don't make a habit of this, she said. The corner of Nash's mouth twitched almost a smile. Neither do I. Something about his dignity made the decision easier, or perhaps it was simply that she had no alternative. The truck's interior smelled of sage and motor oil. As they pulled away from the station, Gwen watched Desert Key recede in the side mirror, a cluster of buildings, hunkered against the vastness, like they were afraid of being swallowed by it. Your accent, Nash said after several minutes of silence. Minnesota. Wisconsin originally, but I've been in Massachusetts for the last 25 years. Until the divorce had forced her to sell the house, a detail she kept to herself. Long way from home. Gwen watched the darkening landscape, mesas rising like sentinels against the indigo sky. That was the idea. They drove in silence after that, the truck's headlights carving a tunnel through the darkness. Gwen found herself oddly comfortable with the quiet. After months of well-meaning advice from friends and tearful phone calls with her children, silence felt like a luxury. The turnoff came suddenly, a dirt road winding into scrubby hills. The truck jolted over ruts, forcing Gwen to brace her hand against the dashboard. Sorry about the road, Nash said. County hasn't graded it since spring. It's fine. Gwen peered through the windshield as they crested a hill, revealing a valley bathed in moonlight. Oh! Below them lay a small cluster of buildings nestled against red stone cliffs. The main structure was a sprawling adobe house with a tin roof that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Several smaller outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance the moonlight illuminated what appeared to be ancient markings on the cliff face. My grandfather built the main house, Nash said, a note of pride warming his voice. Added to it over the years, my father expanded the west wing. I did the workshop out back. It's beautiful, Gwen said, meaning it. As they approached, a border collie with graying muzzle came loping out to meet them, barking once in greeting. That's Tosi, Nash said. It means slender in Navajo. Don't let the gray fool you, she still thinks she's a puppy. The truck rolled to a stop in front of the house. Nash killed the engine, and suddenly the night was alive with sound crickets, the distant cry of a coyote, the whisper of wind through juniper trees. You can stay in my daughter's old room, Nash said, opening his door. She lives in Phoenix now, doesn't visit much. At the doorway, Gwen paused. The empty suitcase she carried, returned by Nash from his truck bed, felt symbolic somehow. A blank slate, a life stripped down to essentials. "Thank you," she said, standing at the threshold of what felt strangely like a new beginning. "I appreciate the kindness." Nash nodded, holding the door. Sometimes kindness is all we have to offer, sometimes it's enough. Morning light filtered through hand-woven curtains, waking Gwen from a fitful sleep. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, the unfamiliar ceiling, the scent of sage and desert dust. Then it all came rushing back, the train, the stolen suitcase, Nash Greyhawk's unexpected rescue. She rose and dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, smoothing wrinkles as best she could. The guest room was sparsely furnished, but beautiful, a simple pine bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser topped with a silver brush set, walls adorned with woven hangings in geometric patterns of red and black. Following the scent of coffee, Gwen found her way to the kitchen. Nash stood at an old cast-iron stove, his back to her. A small leather bundle hung from a nail near the door, his medicine bundle, she would later learn, containing sacred items passed down through generations. "Good morning," she said. Nash turned, nodding acknowledgement. "Coffee's ready. Hope you don't mind it strong. After nursing school, I could drink it straight from the pot." She accepted the mug he offered, noting the chip in its rim, the faded pattern of thunderbirds circling the ceramic. They ate a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush, sweetened with honey and dried berries. Through the kitchen window, Gwen could see the property in daylight for the first time, beautiful but showing signs of neglect. Adobe walls needed patching, the corral fence leaned at worrying angles, and weeds had claimed what once might have been a garden. "You were a nurse?" Nash asked, breaking the silence. 20 years. Gave it up when my kids were young." She didn't add that her ex-husband had insisted, claiming their children needed a full-time mother more than his surgical patients needed another nurse. "Margaret would have liked you." Nash's gaze was steady. "She always said proper healing needs both modern medicine and traditional ways." "Is that what you believe?" Nash's weathered hands cradled his coffee mug. At 72, his fingers showed the swollen knuckles of arthritis, but they moved with deliberate grace. "I believe balance is the way of health. My grandfather was a medicine man, taught me the old ways, but he also sent me to school." A hint of pride entered his voice. "I was a code talker in Korea. Military paid for some college after." Gwen tried to imagine this dignified elder as a young soldier, using his native language as an unbreakable code. That must have been difficult, being between two worlds. "Still am." Nash rose, carrying his plate to the sink. "Come, I want to show you something." Outside, the day was already warming, the sun harsh on Gwen's pale skin. Nash led her past outbuildings to a flat area near the cliff base. Here, wooden stakes marked out a large rectangular foundation. "This is what I've been working on, a healing center." His voice softened with conviction. "Traditional medicine alongside modern care, a place for both worlds to meet." Looking at the modest stakes and the aging man beside her, Gwen felt a pang of something between admiration and concern. "It's a beautiful vision. But you think I'm too old to see it through." Nash's perception was unsettling. "I didn't say that. Didn't need to." There was no bitterness in his observation. "The bank thinks the same. 2 weeks until they foreclose. Unless I can pay back taxes and a loan I should never have taken." Gwen studied him with new understanding. "Is that why you brought me here? You need a nurse for your healing center?" "I need someone who understands both worlds, someone practical." Nash met her gaze directly. "Margaret spoke highly of you in her letters. Said you were wasted answering phones in your ex-husband's office." Gwen felt a flush of both embarrassment and validation. "You've been planning this." "The Creator provides what we need, when we need it." Nash gestured to the empty suitcase on the porch. "Sometimes by taking everything else away first." "I was only planning to stay until the next train," Gwen said carefully. Nash nodded, unperturbed. "Train comes through every Tuesday and Friday. Your choice which one you take." As they walked back to the house, Gwen noticed a sleek business card tucked under the front door, Sunbelt Development, in embossed gold letters. Nash took it without comment, but his jaw tightened as he slipped it into his pocket. "More vultures," he muttered. "Been circling since Margaret got sick." "Town's changed," Nash commented as they drove through Desert Key's single main street. "Used to be mostly trading posts and feed stores. Now it's all real estate offices and coffee shops." Gwen observed the strange mix of old and newer weathered trading post with turquoise jewelry in the window, sat beside a sleek office with desert luxury properties emblazoned on the glass. A handful of tourists browsed storefronts while pickup trucks belonging to locals idled at the single stoplight. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Tribal office first, then the general store for supplies." Nash parked in front of a modest building with a faded tribal seal painted on the door. Inside, a middle-aged woman with glasses and a turquoise necklace looked up from her computer. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Gwen. "Nash Greyhawk, as I live and breathe, didn't expect to see you until the council meeting." Her gaze shifted to Gwen. "And you've brought company." "Margaret Whitefeather, this is Gwen Mallory. She was meant to be Margaret Yazzy's nurse." "Oh, that's right." Margaret's expression softened. "I'm sorry about that mix-up. Things have been so hectic with the funeral arrangements that notification just slipped through the cracks." "It's fine," Gwen said automatically, though it hadn't been fine at all. Margaret leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Nash, about your proposal. Council's divided. Victor's been meeting with those Sunbelt people, and he's got 3 members leaning his way." Nash's expression remained impassive, but Gwen noticed his shoulders tense. "Just wanted you to know before Tuesday's meeting." Margaret glanced at her computer as it chimed with an email notification. "Speak of the devil." The office door opened, and a man in an expensive-looking suit entered. His smile was practiced, his handshake ready before anyone had agreed to take it. "Mr. Greyhawk, what perfect timing. James Caldwell, Sunbelt Development." The hand remained extended, even as Nash made no move to accept it. After an awkward moment, Caldwell withdrew it, smoothly transitioning to pull a business card from his breast pocket identical to the one Gwen had seen at Nash's door. "I was hoping to catch you. Our offer expires at the end of the week, and I'd hate to see you miss this opportunity." Caldwell's smile never faltered. "This is the most generous package we've put together for any property in the area." "Not interested," Nash said flatly. "I understand your attachment to the land, but please consider." "I said no." Nash's voice remained level, but something in his tone silenced Caldwell mid-sentence. The developer's smile tightened. "I'm trying to help you avoid complications, Mr. Greyhawk. Once the foreclosure process begins, your options become much more limited." "Is that a threat?" Gwen asked, surprising herself. Caldwell turned to her as if noticing her for the first time. "And you are?" "Someone who recognizes pressure tactics when she hears them," Gwen replied evenly. A flicker of annoyance crossed Caldwell's face before his professional mask returned. "Just a friendly warning. Banking regulations can be so inflexible." He placed his card on Margaret's desk. "My offer stands until Friday. After that, I'm afraid we'll have to pursue other legal options." After Caldwell left, Margaret exhaled loudly. "That man gives me the creeps." "What did he mean by other legal options?" Gwen asked as they walked to Nash's truck. "Nothing good." Nash's face was grim. "Sunbelt wants to build a resort. My land sits right where they plan to put their golf course and spa." At the general store, they filled the truck with supplies, flour, coffee, canned goods, and materials for adobe repair. The elderly shopkeeper added a bag of dried medicinal herbs. "On the house," with a pointed look at Nash. "People are talking about your healing center," he explained. "Some of us remember what your grandfather did for this community." The drive back was quiet, Nash lost in thought, Gwen trying to process everything she'd learned. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the ranch, Nash suddenly slowed the truck. "Someone's been here," he said, pointing to fresh tire tracks cutting across their own from that morning. The foreclosure notice was nailed to the front door, its official seal and red urgent stamp visible from yards away. Nash read it silently, his expression unchanging. "They've expedited it," he said finally. "We have 2 weeks, not a month." "Can they do that?" "They just did." Nash folded the notice carefully, his movements deliberate. "Caldwell has friends at the bank." That night, Gwen lay awake, listening to Nash's soft prayer songs drifting through the house. The melody was unlike anything she'd heard before, haunting, ancient, resilient, like the man himself. 2 weeks. The deadline hung in the air like a sentence. Morning found Gwen at the kitchen table with a notepad, making lists. It was what she always did when life spiraled beyond her control, create order from chaos, one bullet point at a time. Assets, she murmured, tapping her pen. Liabilities, potential funding sources. Nash watched from the doorway, a mug of coffee in his gnarled hands. You always wake up planning? Force of habit. 20 years of hospital shifts will do that to you. She didn't look up as she wrote. Your property has value beyond the land. Your knowledge, for one. We need to inventory everything, plant specimens, recipes, healing techniques, document it all. Those things aren't meant to be written down. They're taught person to person, stories and practice. Gwen finally met his eyes. I understand tradition, Nash, but the bank doesn't care about oral history. They want numbers on paper. The day unfolded in a clash of approaches. Gwen wanted schedules, categories, measurable outcomes. Nash worked by intuition, seasons, the angle of sun through canyon walls. By mid-afternoon, frustration simmered between them. This is never going to work if you won't be practical, Gwen finally said, exasperated after Nash spent an hour explaining why certain plants could only be harvested during specific moon phases. And it will never be right if you think healing fits in your little boxes. Nash's voice remained calm, but his eyes flashed. This isn't a hospital, Gwen. Maybe it should be. At least then it would have a chance of surviving. The words came out harsher than she intended. Nash went silent, turning away to gaze out the window toward the cliffs. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened. Come with me. He led her to a small room off the main living area, space she hadn't yet entered. Inside, the walls were lined with bookshelves containing hundreds of carefully labeled jars of dried plants, powders, and tinctures. A worn desk held stacks of notebooks filled with handwriting in both English and what she assumed was Apache. My grandfather's knowledge. My father's, mine. Nash gestured to the collection. 5 generations of healing. Not so disorganized after all, Gwen felt a flush of embarrassment. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. No apologies needed. Nash opened a drawer and removed a small metal box. From it, he took a set of tarnished dog tags on a chain. I was like you once. Thought the old ways needed improving. He placed the dog tags in her palm. The metal was cool, the stamped letters still legible. Greyhawk, Nahazdzan, followed by a service number and blood type. Korea, he said simply. I was 20, thought I knew everything. Used my language as a code the enemy couldn't break, but at night, I used my grandfather's healing songs for the wounded when morphine ran low. Gwen ran her thumb over the tags, imagining a young Nash caught between worlds even then. My wife understood balance, he continued. Modern education, traditional heart. She helped me see that both have value. You must miss her very much, Gwen said softly. Every day. Nash reclaimed the tags, holding them a moment before returning them to their box. Before she died, I promised her I'd protect this land. Not just the dirt and rocks, what it means, what it could be. A crack of thunder interrupted the moment. They looked out to see dark clouds gathering over the mesas, unusual for the season. Rain's coming, Nash said. Better check the roof. The downpour began as they were securing a tarp over a weak section of the roof. By the time they made it inside, they were both soaked. Nash built a fire in the stone hearth while Gwen made tea. Your medicine room, she said as they warmed themselves. We should move everything away from the south wall. That's where the leak is worst. They worked through evening, carefully relocating dried herbs and tinctures. As Nash shifted a heavy bookshelf, a section of the adobe wall behind it crumbled slightly, revealing a hidden compartment. What's this? Gwen asked, peering into the darkness. Nash looked as surprised as she was. I don't know. Reaching carefully into the opening, he withdrew a dust-covered leather satchel, its surface cracked with age. As he placed it on the table between them, something shifted inside the sound of paper against paper. Open it, Gwen urged, the mysteries of the day momentarily forgotten. Nash's hands hesitated over the ancient leather ties. The leather satchel's contents lay spread across the kitchen table, yellowed field journals, official-looking letters on government stationery, and faded photographs of men in military uniforms standing beside Apache elders. "My father's journals," Nash said, his voice hushed with reverence, "from his time as a code talker in the Second World War." Gwen carefully turned the brittle pages of one journal, filled with neat handwriting that alternated between English and what she assumed was Apache. "What does it say?" "Daily observations, mostly. Weather conditions, troop movements." Nash's finger traced the lines as he read. "But here, this is interesting. He mentions meetings with government officials about using tribal land for something called Project Eagle." "What was that?" "I don't know." Nash selected another documenter letter with an official Department of War seal. This is dated 1943. It references temporary use authorization and consideration for services rendered. Gwen leaned closer. "Nash, this looks like some kind of agreement between the government and your tribe." "My father never mentioned this." Nash's brow furrowed as he examined more papers. "There's something about 99 years and mineral rights. If there was a formal agreement that was never properly terminated." Gwen didn't finish the thought, but excitement crept into her voice. "This could be important for your case." Nash carefully returned the documents to the satchel. "These were my father's private writings. Using them feels wrong. Even to save his land." Before Nash could respond, headlights swept across the window. A moment later, there was a knock at the door. The visitor was a man in his 30s, with short black hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Ben Blackhorse, Nash's nephew and a history professor at the community college. "Uncle," he greeted Nash with a hug before turning curious eyes to Gwen. "This is Gwen Mallory," Nash explained. "She's helping with the Healing Center project." "The nurse Margaret mentioned in her letters?" Ben extended his hand. "Good to meet you. We need all the help we can get." Over coffee, Nash showed Ben the discovered documents. The younger man's excitement grew as he examined them. "This could be huge," he said finally. "If these journals document a formal agreement that the government never properly terminated, it could invalidate Sunbelt's claims." "How?" Gwen asked. "Land rights are complicated on tribal territories," Ben explained. "But basically, if the government entered into a lease agreement for use of this specific parcel and never formally ended that agreement, it could supersede current ownership claims." "You think these journals are proof of that?" Ben adjusted his glasses. "They're a start. I'll need to research further, maybe check federal archives, but this is definitely worth pursuing." After Ben left with photocopies of the documents, Gwen and Nash sat in silence, the weight of possibility hanging between them. "Tomorrow, we should start on the roof repairs," Nash said finally. "Rain's coming back end of the week." Gwen nodded, understanding his need to focus on tangible work while the legal questions sorted themselves out. Morning found them on the roof, replacing damaged shingles and sealing leaks. By midday, they had moved to clearing overgrown areas where Nash planned to plant healing gardens. The physical labor created a different kind of partnership between Themen built on shared exertion and small achievements. "You're stronger than you look," Nash commented as Gwen hefted a large branch onto their growing brush pile. "Nursing isn't all paperwork," she replied with a smile. "Try turning a 300-pound patient by yourself." As the sun began to set, they sat on the porch, drinking water and watching the light change on the canyon walls. Nash pointed out petroglyphs barely visible on the distant cliff-sentient symbols etched by his ancestors centuries ago. "What do they mean?" Gwen asked. "Stories, warnings, celebrations." Nash's voice took on the cadence of a storyteller. "That spiral marks a place where water can be found in drought. Those wavy lines record a great flood. The handprints say, 'We were here.'" The ringing of Gwen's cell phone broke the Mammentha daughter calling from Chicago. "Mom, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you for days." "I'm fine, Katie." Gwen caught Nash's eye and mouthed "my daughter" as she stood to take the call in private. "Where are you staying? Did you find a hotel?" "Not exactly," Gwen hesitated. "I'm helping someone with a project, a healing center combining traditional Apache medicine with modern healthcare." "You're staying with strangers. Mom, that's not safe." It's perfectly safe. Nash is. Gwen paused, unsure how to describe him. He's a healer, a good man. As she spoke, she noticed a truck driving slowly past the property, the driver clearly taking photographs. She frowned, making a mental note to mention it to Nash. "I'll call you tomorrow," she promised her daughter. "I need to go now." Ben returned the next evening with a stack of legal pads filled with notes. He spread his findings across Nash's kitchen table while Gwen made coffee. "I've been through every page," he said, excitement edging his voice. "Uncle, these journals document a formal agreement between the federal government and tribal representatives, including your father, for use of this canyon during the war." "For what purpose?" Nash asked. "Training, mostly. The military needed terrain similar to the Pacific Islands where they were fighting. They used your family's land for survival training and communications exercises." Ben shuffled through his notes. "The agreement specified a 99-year lease with provisions for termination, but I can't find any record that it was ever properly ended." "How does this help us?" Gwen asked, setting mugs on the table. "If the lease is still technically in effect, it would supersede any bank claims." Ben's expression turned cautious. "But there's a problem. Key pages seem to be missing from the journal, specifically the ones that would contain signatures and terms." Nash frowned. "My father wouldn't have removed those." "Someone else might have," Ben suggested. "These documents could be valuable or dangerous, depending on who's looking at them." After Ben left, Nash retreated to his workroom and returned with a roll of paper architectural drawings for the healing center, rendered in his precise hand. Watching him smooth the plans on the table, Gwen saw not just a dream, but a legacy in making. "These are beautiful," she said, studying the detailed renderings. The design blended traditional circular structures with modern clinical spaces, all oriented to capture specific light angles through carefully placed windows. "Form follows function," Nash explained, tracing the main building's outline. "The central dome is for group healing ceremonies. These smaller rooms are for individual treatments." "What about space for modern medical equipment? Examination rooms?" Gwen asked. Nash handed her a pencil. "Show me what you'd add." They worked together for hours, Gwen suggesting practical additions, while Nash ensured they remained true to the traditional elements. By midnight, the plans had evolved into something neither could have created alone. "It could work," Gwen said, surprised by her own conviction. "It will work," Nash corrected gently, "if we can keep the land." Morning brought an unexpected visitor, an elderly woman from a neighboring property, carrying a basket of fresh bread and dried apricots. "Heard you were planning a healing center," she said after Nash introduced her as Clara Begay. "My arthritis needs something closer than the clinic in town." Soon Clara was seated at the kitchen table, sharing stories of Nash's grandfather treating her family decades ago. Before leaving, she promised to spread word about a community workday to help clear the property. "People remember what your family has done for this community," she told Nash. "Not everyone supports those developers." True to Clara's word, Saturday brought a small group of volunteers, mostly elders, who remembered Nash's grandfather, but also a few younger people curious about traditional healing. Among them was Margaret Whitefeather from the tribal office, who worked alongside Gwen, clearing brush for fire protection. "Victor's worried about your discovery," Margaret confided as they worked. "Those missing pages might be in the tribal archives. He's been chairman for 15 years and guards those records like a hawk." "Why would he oppose the healing center?" Gwen asked. Margaret wiped sweat from her brow. "Progress, he calls it. Sunbelt promises jobs, tourism dollars. Some see Nash's ways as holding us back." From a nearby ridge, Gwen noticed James Caldwell watching the activity through binoculars, his sleek company car parked on the county road. When he realized she'd spotted him, he drove away without acknowledgement. As the volunteers departed with promises to return, Nash led Gwen to a secluded garden area behind the house. Here, medicinal plants grew in careful arrangement, some native, others clearly cultivated over generations. "This is what I need help with," Nash said, kneeling beside a plant with silvery leaves. "Learning which of your medicines work with these traditional ones." Gwen knelt beside him, feeling the plant's leathery texture. "What is this one?" "Desert sage, good for respiratory problems, inflammation." Nash demonstrated how to harvest leaves without damaging the plant. My grandfather used to say that healing happens in the space between knowledge and faith. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the canyon, Gwen found herself unexpectedly at peace. The practical nurse in her recognized the challenges ahead: funding, permits, clinical protocols. But something deeper responded to this place, to Nash's quiet wisdom, to the possibility of creating something that honored both tradition and progress. That night, she checked her phone to find the Arizona Nursing Board website bookmarked. Her license had lapsed 3 years ago, but reinstatement in Arizona required only continuing education credits and an application fee. Before she could reconsider, Gwen began the renewal process. "Miss Mallory, hello?" The station manager's voice crackled over the phone. "That suitcase you reported missing? Someone turned it in this morning." Gwen and Nash drove to the station, where the manager handed over her battered grey suitcase. "Funny thing," he said, scratching his head. "It was just sitting on the platform bench, clean as a whistle." Back at the ranch, Gwen opened it cautiously. Her clothes were there, slightly wrinkled but otherwise untouched. Nothing seemed missing, but something had been added: an old photograph tucked between the folds of a sweater. "Nash," she called, "look at this." The sepia image showed a group of men in military uniforms standing beside several Apache men in civilian clothes. One face was unmistakably a younger version of Nash's father. "Turn it over," Nash said quietly. On the back, faded pencil markings read, "Project Eagle 1943, followed by what appeared to be a series of numbers. "Those look like page references," Gwen suggested. "For the journals?" Nash nodded, his expression troubled. "Someone's sending us a message. Question is, friend or enemy?" That evening, after a simple dinner, Nash invited Gwen to join him on the porch. The sunset painted the canyon walls in fiery gold and deep purple shadows. "Time you learned something practical," he said, producing a small bundle of dried herbs and a clay cup. Gwen watched as Nash prepared a cedar tea ceremony, his movements deliberate and reverent. He explained each step, from the selection of specific cedar needles to the prayer spoken over the steaming cup. "Cedar is protection," he said, passing her the cup. "Cleanses the spirit, clears the mind, good for new beginnings." The tea was aromatic and slightly bitter, warming Gwen from the inside. As they shared the drink, Nash spoke of his late wife, Saraha teacher, who had balanced traditional ways with modern education. 37 years together," he said, his voice soft with memory. "Still not enough." "I was married 23, Gwen offered, though the last 5 barely counted." "What happened?" Gwen stared into her cup. "He decided our receptionist was more interesting. She was 28. Nash made a sound somewhere between a grunt and a chuckle. "His loss." The simple statement, delivered without platitudes or pity, loosened something in Gwen's chest. For the first time, she found herself telling the unvarnished truth about her divorce, the humiliation, the financial struggles, the painful readjustment of her children's loyalty. "I gave up everything for that marriage," she concluded. "My career, my independence, won't make that mistake again." Nash nodded, understanding in his eyes. Hard-earned wisdom often comes too late. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Ben's car, kicking up dust as it sped down the driveway. He burst from the vehicle, waving a folder. "I found something," he announced, spreading papers on the outdoor table. "The numbers on that photograph? They led me to archive documents mentioning a classified agreement. The government leased this land for a secret facility, with special provisions protecting Apache rights to the property." "Does it nullify the foreclosure?" Gwen asked. Ben's expression was cautiously optimistic. "It could, but we need the original signed documents. These are just references to them." As Ben departed with promises to continue searching, Gwen noticed Nash seemed distracted, gazing toward the cliffs where ancient petroglyphs caught the day's last light. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That nothing happens by chance." He turned to face her. "Your job disappearing, your suitcase being stolen and returned with that photograph, someone is guiding events. Or manipulating them," Gwen countered. "Someone's playing a game with your land at stake." Nash shook his head. "Not a game, a test." The next morning, a young mother arrived at the door. a fussing infant in her arms. "Mr. Greyhawk, Clara Begay said you might help. My baby hasn't slept in 3 days. The clinic just gave me formula samples, but they're making it worse." Nash welcomed her inside, gesturing for Gwen to join them. In the kitchen, he prepared a mild cedar tea while explaining to Gwen how it soothed colic when given in tiny amounts. Together, they showed the mother how to administer the remedy and proper burping techniques. Within minutes, the baby's cries subsided to whimpers, then to sleep. "First patient," Nash said after the grateful mother left. "Many more will come once word spreads." Gwen found herself smiling. "I guess we're in business." Later that afternoon, she checked her email to find confirmation that her nursing license renewal was being processed. The sense of returning to her profession filled her with a satisfaction she hadn't felt in years. Then came another message from James Caldwell of Sunbelt Development, offering her a position as health coordinator at their planned luxury wellness resort. The salary figure made her breath catch. Without replying, she closed her laptop and went to help Nash prepare dinner. The tribal council chamber was a study in contrast traditional woven tapestries hung on walls equipped with modern projection screens, and elders in ceremonial attire sat beside younger members in business casual. Nash and Gwen took seats in the front row, their presentation materials carefully organized. Victor Redhorse, the council chairman, called the meeting to order. In his 50s, with short-cropped hair and a tailored suit, he projected authority and impatience in equal measure. Next item, Greyhawk Healing Center proposal. Victor's tone suggested he'd already made up his mind. "Nash, you have 10 minutes. Nash stood with quiet dignity, his weathered hands steady as he distributed folders to each council member. As he outlined his Visiona Center blending traditional healing with modern medical care, Gwen studied the council's reactions. Margaret Whitefeather nodded encouragingly, while others remained impassive. Victor checked his watch repeatedly. When Nash finished, Victor leaned forward. "Noble ideas, but where's the business plan? Revenue projections? This reads more like a cultural preservation project than a sustainable enterprise." "It's both," Nash replied simply. "The council can't authorize emergency funds based on sentiment." Victor's gaze swept the room. "And there's the matter of these supposed historical documents you've been investigating. If they exist, they belong in tribal archives, not in private hands." "We're still gathering evidence," Nash began, but Victor cut him off. "Until you have something concrete, the council will defer decision on financial support." He tapped his gavel. "Next item." Outside the chamber, Margaret joined them briefly. "Don't lose heart. Some of us see the value in what you're proposing. But Victor's worried about dividing the tribe over this Sunbelt development." The drive home was quiet, Nash staring at the road ahead, Gwen unsure how to comfort him. As they crested the hill overlooking the property, Nash suddenly slowed the truck. "We have visitors." A young woman sat on the porch steps, a fussing baby in her arms. Beside her, an elderly man waited patiently. "Clara Begay must have sent them," Nash said, parking the truck. The woman rose as they approached. "Mr. Greyhawk, I'm Teresa Littlebird. My baby has colic, and Dr. Wilson at the clinic says it's nothing, but she cries all night, and I haven't slept in days, and my grandfather said your family used to help with these things." Nash led them inside, retrieving a special cedar tea set from a cabineta, small clay pot and tiny cups, each decorated with geometric patterns. With Gwen assisting, he prepared a mild infusion, explaining each step to Teresa, while Gwen translated the process into medical terms she could understand. "The cedar has anti-inflammatory properties," Gwen explained, watching Nash add a pinch of another herb. "Combined with fennel, it eases gas pain and helps digestion." Nash spoke softly in Apache as he stirred the tea, then in English. "Medicine works better when administered with good intentions. The prayer asks for comfort and healing." He showed Teresa how to give tiny amounts to the infant, then demonstrated gentle massage techniques for gas relief. Within 20 minutes, the baby had settled into peaceful sleep. The grandfather, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "I remember your father doing the same for my children. The old ways still work." After they left, Nash handed Gwen one of the small cups. "You did well today. You bridged two worlds for that mother made my tradition understandable in your terms. The compliment warmed her more than she expected. We make a good team. That evening, Ben arrived with more findings. The journals mention a government facility built on the North Ridge during the war. It was used for signal intelligence, basically, a listening post staffed partly by code talkers. My father never spoke of this, Nash said. It was classified. Ben spread out a map. The agreement granted use of the land for 99 years, with provisions that it would revert fully to tribal ownership after that time, along with compensation. Which would be due when? Gwen asked. That's the part I can't find. Ben looked frustrated. The key pages with those details are still missing. Later, as Gwen prepared dinner, she noticed Nash standing at the kitchen window, gazing toward the North Ridge. She moved beside him, close enough to feel his warmth without touching. "What do you see out there?" she asked. "Ghosts," he replied. "My father walking these canyons, my grandfather before him." His voice softened. Sarah planting her garden. Without thinking, Gwen placed her hand on his weathered one. Nash turned his palm upward, their fingers intertwining in a moment of shared understanding. The touch was brief but electric, startling them both. Nash withdrew his hand first, moving to set the table. Gwen remained at the window, her heart racing with unexpected emotion. That night, alone in her room, Gwen fought conflicting feelings. She had come to Arizona to reclaim independence, not to develop attachments. Yet Nash's quiet strength and vision had awakened something she thought long buried. "Temporary," she reminded herself firmly. "I'm just helping until the crisis passes." But as she drifted to sleep, the memory of his hand in hers followed her into dreams. Dark clouds gathered over the mesas, bringing an early twilight and the promise of a rare summer storm. Nash built a fire in the stone fireplace, while Gwen prepared a simple stew from garden vegetables and dried meat. "Roads will be washed out by morning," Nash observed, watching lightning flicker between clouds. "No visitors tomorrow." Dinner passed in comfortable silence, the drumming rain creating a cocoon around the old adobe house. After they'd cleared the dishes, Nash disappeared briefly into his bedroom, returning with a worn leather photo album. "Thought you might like to see this," he said, settling beside her on the couch, "since we're stormbound." The album's first pages held faded images of Nash's childhood, a serious boy standing beside a stern-faced man in front of the very house they now occupied. "My father," Nash explained, "he didn't smile much, especially after coming back from the war." As they turned the pages, Nash's life unfolded: his military service, college graduation, wedding day. Sarah Greyhawk had been beautiful, with intelligent eyes and a confident smile. Photos showed the couple working the land, building additions to the house, celebrating with friends and family. "She taught at the reservation school," Nash said, his finger tracing the outline of his wife's face in a group photo with children. "Mathematics and science. She believed our children needed both traditional knowledge and modern education to thrive." Later images showed a young woman who shared Sarah's smile but had Nash's eyes. "Maya, our daughter." Pride and sadness mingled in his voice. "She lives in Phoenix now, works as a paralegal." "You don't see her often?" Nash shook his head. "She wanted different things, modern life, city opportunities. Can't blame her for that." Gwen thought of her own children, Katie pursuing a PhD in Chicago, Michael working for a tech startup in Boston. They have to find their own paths. "Yes," Nash agreed, "but sometimes I wish her path led home more often." Gwen found herself sharing stories of her own family, her children's achievements, her ex-husband's betrayal, the years spent subordinating her ambitions to family needs. "I was good at nursing," she admitted. "Had started specialized training in geriatric care when I got pregnant with Katie. Robert Meek said one medical career per family was enough." "And now?" Nash asked. "Now I'm remembering who I was before I became just someone's wife and mother." The vulnerability in her voice surprised her. Nash nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Reclaiming your medicine bundle." "My what?" "In our tradition, each person gathers their gifts, their power, in a sacred bundle." Nash gestured to the medicine pouch that hung near the door. "Not just physical items, knowledge, skills, purpose. Sounds like you're gathering yours again." The observation was so accurate that Gwen fell silent, contemplating how this man she'd known barely a week could see so clearly what had taken her years to recognize. The storm intensified, wind howling around the eaves of the old house. They continued through the album, Nash narrating the story of his life through photography's years, working as a cultural liaison for the National Park Service, Sarah's battle with cancer, the graduation ceremonies of students they'd mentored. "You've lived a full life," Gwen said as they reached the album's end. "Not finished yet," Nash replied with a slight smile. "Best chapters could still be ahead." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them before Gwen looked away, suddenly conscious of their closeness on the couch. As if sensing her discomfort, Nash rose to add wood to the fire. "Business plan needs more work if we're going to convince the council." Grateful for the shift to practical matters, Gwen retrieved her notebook. "I've been thinking about funding options. There are federal grants for rural healthcare initiatives and possibly historical preservation funds if Ben's research pans out." They worked late into the night, refining the healing center concept. Nash sketched additional facilities while Gwen created budget projections. Their different approaches now complemented rather than clashed, creating a plan stronger than either could have developed alone. When Gwen finally retired to her room, exhaustion should have brought immediate sleep. Instead, she lay awake, replaying moments from the evening, the warmth in Nash's eyes as he shared his memories, the brief touch of their hands as they both reached for the same document, the comfortable silence they now shared. "This isn't why you came here," she whispered to herself. "Remember the plan." But her resolve was weaker than it had been just days ago, when a stranded woman with an empty suitcase had reluctantly accepted a ride from a stranger. Outside, the storm began to subside, rain softening to a gentle patter against the roof. The storm had cleared the desert air, leaving behind a crystalline morning. Gwen found Nash in his workshop, carefully sanding what appeared to be a wooden flute. "You make those?" she asked, accepting the coffee mug he offered with his free hand. "My grandfather taught me." Nash blew softly across the mouthpiece, producing a low, haunting note. Not quite right yet. He reached for another finished flute from a rack on the wall, this one darker wood adorned with intricate carvings of animals and plants. "Music is medicine," he explained, placing it in her hands. "Different melodies for different ailments. This one," he played a gentle rising sequence, "is for grief. This one," a series of quick bright notes, "helps children with fear." Gwen turned the instrument in her hands, admiring the craftsmanship. "I never learned to play anything." "Never too late." Nash positioned her fingers on the holes. "Just breathe into it, like talking to a friend." Her first attempt produced only a whisper of sound, but Nash nodded encouragingly. "The instrument remembers your breath. Try again." By her third attempt, Gwen produced a clear, pure note that seemed to hang in the air between them. "See?" Nash smiled. "You have music in you." That afternoon, they hosted their first organized healing session. Word had spread through the community, bringing 5 participants, mostly older people with chronic pain conditions. Nash had prepared the main room with cushions arranged in a circle, ceremonial items placed at the cardinal points. "We'll combine approaches," he told Gwen beforehand. "I'll lead with traditional songs, then you guide them through relaxation techniques while I play the flute." Watching Nash work was a revelation. His presence transformed as he conducted the ceremony, his voice deeper, his movements fluid yet precise. He spoke in Apache first, then translated to English, explaining the healing tradition's connection to the land, the plants, the elements. When Gwen's turn came, she drew on her nursing experience with pain management, guiding the participants through progressive relaxation while Nash's flute provided a gentle soundtrack. The combination was powerful. Several participants became emotional, one elderly woman wiping away tears. "I haven't felt this loose in 20 years, she told Gwen afterward. As the participants departed, Margaret Whitefeather arrived with news. "The council is talking about your proposal again," she said. "Your session today impressed Mrs. Begayand. She's Victor's aunt. She's been bending his ear about supporting you." "Good news at last," Gwen said. "There's more." Margaret lowered her voice. Ben found references to your documents in federal archives. He's driving to Phoenix tomorrow to retrieve copies. Hope flickered, fragile but persistent. After Margaret left, Nash and Gwen celebrated with tea on the porch, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls. "We make a good team," Nash said, echoing Gwen's earlier sentiment. Before she could respond, Gwen's phone rang Michael, her son. "Mom, Katie said you're staying with some medicine man in the desert. What's going on?" Gwen walked away from the porch for privacy, but the call quickly deteriorated into an argument. Michael insisted she return east immediately, citing safety concerns that felt more patronizing than loving. "I'm 50, not 15, she finally snapped. "I don't need permission to make my own choices." When she returned to the porch, Nash had disappeared. She found him at the edge of the property, playing his flute as the first stars appeared. "Family trouble?" he asked when he finished the melody. "My son thinks I've lost my mind, living with a strange man in the desert." Gwen's attempt at humor fell flat. "They forget I took care of them for decades. Suddenly they think I can't take care of myself." "Children worry," Nash said simply, "even when grown." "Your daughter, does she worry about you?" Pain flickered across Nash's face. "Maya worries about different things. The mortgage, my refusal to sell to developers, my unhealthy attachment to the past, as she calls it." They stood in silence, watching the stars emerge in greater numbers than Gwen had ever seen in Massachusetts. "I should call her," Nash said eventually. "Tell her about the documents we found. She has a right to know." The moment was interrupted by headlights on the access road, Ben's car arriving hours ahead of schedule. He jumped out before the engine had fully stopped, waving a folder. "You need to see this right away," he called, hurrying toward them. "I found something in the Tribal Archives restricted section, something Victor's been keeping quiet." Inside, Ben spread the contents of his folder on the table, photocopies of documents nearly identical to those from the hidden satchel, but these included the missing pages. "Look at the signatures," Ben said, pointing to the final page. There, alongside military officials' names, was a familiar signature, Joseph Redhorse, Victor's father. "Victor's father was part of the same agreement as my father," Nash said slowly, understanding dawning. "That's why the pages were missing from my father's journals." "But why hide it?" Gwen asked. "If anything, it strengthens your claim to the land." Ben's expression was grim. "Because there's more. According to these documents, the government agreed to significant financial compensation to be held in trust for both families. Money that was never distributed." "How much?" Nash asked. "Adjusted for inflation?" Ben took a deep breath. "Enough to pay off the mortgage 100 times over." A black SUV with tribal government plates rolled up the driveway at dawn, dust billowing behind it. Victor Redhorse stepped out, looking distinctly uncomfortable in jeans and a button-down shirt, a far cry from his usual council attire. Nash met him on the porch, coffee in hand. "Early for a council visit." "This isn't official," Victor replied, declining the offered mug. "I need to speak with you, privately." Gwen made herself scarce in the kitchen, but the thin walls allowed her to hear most of their conversation. "Ben Blackhorse has been asking questions in the archive," Victor began without preamble, "about Project Eagle." "My father's journals mention it," Nash replied evenly. "As do the documents your father signed." Victor's sharp intake of breath was audible even from the kitchen. "You know, what I know is that our fathers had an agreement with the government. What I don't know is why those pages were torn from my father's journals." A long silence followed. When Victor spoke again, his voice had lost its official edge. "My father took them, years ago, when the government investigators came looking for the original contracts." "Why?" "Politics." Victor sighed heavily. "It was during the uranium mining disputes. He was afraid they'd use the agreement to justify more land seizures for national security, so he protected the tribe by making the evidence disappear." "And now?" Nash prompted. "Now I've been doing the same." Victor's admission came reluctantly. Sunbelt's development would bring jobs, tourism, tax revenue. The tribe needs that more than an old healing center. "You don't believe that," Nash challenged. "Not if you're here." Another long silence followed, broken by the sound of paper rustling. Curiosity drew Gwen to peer around the corner. Victor was placing yellowed pages on the coffee table, the missing journal entries. "These confirm everything," Victor said. "A 99-year land use agreement, with significant compensation to be paid to both our families and the tribe. Compensation that was never fully delivered." "Why show me now?" Nash asked. "Because Sunbelt isn't what they claim." Victor's voice hardened. "I've seen their real plans. They're not building a resort that will employ tribal members. They're building a private enclave for the ultra-wealthy, with a golf course that will drain our aquifer and a spa that will commercialize sacred ceremonies as authentic experiences." "And you were supporting them?" Nash's tone remained measured, but Gwen could hear the steel beneath it. "I thought I was being practical." Victor looked away. "The tribe needs revenue, modern jobs. At least that's what I told myself." "And now?" "Now I know they lied. And I've seen what they did to the Navajo community that signed with them last year. Broken promises, environmental damage, sacred sites bulldozed by accident." Victor's bitterness was palpable. "I won't let that happen here." Gwen entered then, unable to remain hidden any longer. "These documents, they could stop the foreclosure?" Victor nodded. "They establish prior claim that supersedes the current mortgage. But more importantly, they prove the government owes substantial compensation that was never paid." "Why would someone return the photograph to my suitcase?" Gwen asked. "Was that you?" "No." Victor looked genuinely puzzled. "But there are elders who've been watching this situation closely, people who remember what both our fathers did for the tribe." After Victor left, promising to call an emergency council session, Nash sat heavily in his chair, the recovered pages spread before him. "All these years," he murmured, "my father never spoke of this." "He was protecting you," Gwen suggested, "like Victor's father protected him." Nash studied the documents, his weathered finger tracing his father's signature. "This changes everything, and nothing." "What do you mean?" "The legal battle is clearer now, but my purpose remains the same: to build the healing center, to preserve the old knowledge while embracing the new." Gwen placed her hand on his shoulder. "I'm glad you're still focused on the center. I was afraid you might just take the money and retire." Nash covered her hand with his. "There's no retirement from purpose, Gwen." The moment was broken by the sound of Nash's phone, rare enough to startle them both. His expression grew concerned as he listened. "I'll be right there," he said, ending the call. "What's wrong?" "My heart," Nash admitted, already reaching for his jacket. "Been having some problems. Dr. Wilson wants me to come in for tests, says my last blood work showed some irregularities." "Why didn't you tell me?" Gwen asked. Nurse instincts immediately activated. "I'm going with you." In the truck, Nash's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, the first sign of vulnerability Gwen had seen in him. "Have you been taking medication?" "Some, when I remember." "Nash." Gwen's voice combined professional concern with personal care. "You can't build a healing center if you're not here." He glanced at her, a half-smile softening his features. "Now you sound like Sarah." The comparison warmed and unsettled her simultaneously. "Take it as a compliment, then. She sounds like a wise woman." Nash's smile faded as he focused on the road ahead. "The wisest. She always said my stubborn independence would be the death of me." The words hung in the air between them, too close to a possibility neither wanted to consider. Dr. Wilson's office was cramped but efficient, medical diplomas sharing wall space with Hopi Kachina dolls. The doctor himself, a white-haired Anglo who'd served the community for 40 years, studied Nash's EKG with a frown. "Not an immediate emergency," he concluded, "but not good either. The arrhythmia's getting worse, Nash. You need to start the medication I prescribed and reduce stress." Gwen, who had insisted on accompanying Nash into the exam room, gave him a pointed look. "She's a nurse," Nash explained to the doctor, "and stubborn." "Good," Dr. Wilson replied, handing Gwen the prescription information. "Maybe you'll listen to her." On the drive back, Ben called with news too sensitive for phone conversation. They arranged to meet at a diner in town. "I found these in the county records office." Ben slid a folder across the table. Inside were Sunbelt's actual development, plans far more extensive than publicly announced. They're planning to dam the seasonal creek that feeds your springs, Ben explained, pointing to engineering diagrams. Create a series of water features for the golf course. It would essentially drain the aquifer that serves not just your property, but 3 other tribal families. Nash studied the plans silently, his face impassive, but Gwen noticed his hands trembling slightly from anger or his heart condition. She couldn't tell. There's more, Ben continued. They've already applied for permits to build roads through areas with documented petroglyphs. Cultural mitigation is built into their budget, meaning they expect to destroy sites and pay the fines. We need to show these to the council, Gwen said. Already arranged. Ben checked his watch. Emergency session tomorrow morning. When they returned to the ranch, an unfamiliar car was parked in the driveway, a sleek hybrid with Phoenix plates. Maya, Nash said quietly. His daughter stood on the porch, arms crossed. In her mid-30s, she had Nash's eyes and her mother's determined jaw, both currently set in disapproval. Dad, her greeting was cool. You haven't been answering your phone. Been busy. Nash embraced her despite her stiff posture. Maya, this is Gwen Mallory. Maya's assessment was swift and skeptical. The nurse Mum mentioned in her letters. Former nurse, Gwen corrected, extending her hand. Maya's handshake was brief. Sunbelt called me. They said you're being stubborn about selling, and now you're dragging up old history to complicate things. Inside, the tension thickened as Maya paced the living room. They offered me a consultant position, she admitted. Said they wanted tribal representation in the resort planning, but really they wanted me to convince you to sell. And did you take it? Nash asked quietly. Maya looked away. I told them I'd think about it. They said the offer expires when foreclosure begins. She turned to face her father. I've seen their plans, Dad. It's happening whether you fight or not. At least this way we get something. You've seen the public plans, Gwen interjected, retrieving Ben's folder. Not these. Maya's expression shifted from defiance to shock as she examined the diagrams. They can't do this. These springs feed ceremonial sites downstream. They can and will, Nash said, unless we stop them. The argument escalated as Nash explained the discovered documents, the potential legal challenge, and his vision for the healing center. Maya countered with practical concerns, legal costs, ongoing maintenance, Nash's health. You're 72, Dad. You can barely keep this place from falling down now. And what happens when you... She stopped, emotion choking her words. When I die? Nash finished gently. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The question hung in the air. Gwen moved to leave, but Nash motioned for her to stay. I'm not young, he acknowledged. But this isn't just about me. It's about what this land has always been, a place of healing. And who'll continue that when you're gone? Maya challenged, tears now visible in her eyes. I have a life in Phoenix, a career. Perhaps someone new, Nash said quietly, his eyes meeting Gwen's briefly. The moment was interrupted by Nash, suddenly pressing his hand to his chest, his face contorting in pain. Nash! Gwen was at his side instantly, guiding him to a chair. Deep breaths. Where's your medication? Maya watched in alarm as Gwen efficiently assessed Nash's condition, checking his pulse and helping him take a pill from a bottle in his pocket. This happens often, Maya asked, her voice small. He hasn't been following his treatment plan, Gwen replied, maintaining professional composure despite her racing heart. But we're going to fix that, aren't we, Nash? Nash's color gradually improved. Bossy woman, he muttered, but squeezed Gwen's hand in thanks. The incident shifted something in Maya. After Nash retired to rest, she approached Gwen on the porch. You really care about him, don't you? It wasn't quite an accusation. I care about what he's trying to do here, Gwen answered carefully. And yes, I care about him. Maya studied her, measuring her sincerity. He's stubborn, gets an idea, won't let it go. I've noticed. Mom was the only one who could manage him. A hint of a smile touched Maya's lips. She'd be glad someone's looking out for him. It wasn't approval exactly, but it was a beginning. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Nash, Gwen, Maya, and Ben gathered around the table, surrounded by documents, maps, and legal pads filled with notes. Empty coffee mugs testified to their early start. "The council meeting is at 10, Ben said, organizing papers into folders. "Victor has arranged for us to present everything, the historical documents, Sunbelt's real plans, and our proposal for the healing center." "What about the injunction?" Maya asked. Her paralegal experience had proven unexpectedly valuable, her initial resistance transformed into determined advocacy overnight. "Filed yesterday," Ben confirmed. "It should delay any foreclosure action until the court reviews the historical claims." Nash sat quietly, his face drawn from a restless night. Gwen had insisted he take his medication and monitored him with professional discretion, but she knew the stress was taking its toll. "We should divide responsibilities," she suggested. "Nash, you focus on the healing center vision, that's what moves people. Ben, you handle the historical documents. Maya, can you address the legal implications?" "And you?" Maya asked, not unkindly. "I'll present the healthcare partnerships I've been developing." Gwen had spent days contacting former colleagues, securing tentative commitments from physicians willing to provide services at the center. The doorbell interrupted their planning. Margaret Whitefeather, clutching a thick stack of papers. "It's happening," she announced, stepping inside. "People are choosing sides. I've been collecting signatures supporting Nash's vision as a cultural preservation project." She spread the petition on the table, dozens of signatures, many from tribal elders Gwen recognized from their healing sessions. "Clara Begay has been unstoppable," Margaret continued. "She's visited every elder on the reservation, telling them about the healing you two provided for her arthritis." Maya examined the petition with growing amazement. "This is half the tribe." "And growing," Margaret confirmed. "The younger ones are coming around too, especially after word leaked about Sunbelt's real plans." As Margaret departed, promising to meet them at the council session, Nash retreated to his room. Gwen found him sitting on the edge of his bed, a small leather pouch in his hands. "Ceremony before battle," he explained, opening the pouch to reveal sacred Itemson eagle feather, a small carved stone, herbs bound with sinew. "My grandfather taught me prayers for strength and clarity." "Would you mind if I sat with you?" Gwen asked softly. Nash looked up, surprise giving way to appreciation. "I would welcome it." The ritual was simple but profound, sacred, herbs burned in a shell, prayers spoken in Apache, the eagle feather used to direct smoke over each of them. Though Gwen didn't understand the words, their intent was clear: guidance, protection, wisdom. When Nash finished, they sat in silence, the morning sunlight creating patterns on the wooden floor. Gwen felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you," she said simply. Nash nodded, his eyes holding hers for a long moment. "Sarah used to sit with me like this. She understood that some medicines can't be measured or prescribed." The comparison no longer unsettled Gwen. Instead, it felt like acceptance, permission to occupy a space in Nash's life that had been vacant too long. The tribal council chamber was packed beyond capacity, forcing the proceedings to move to the community center gymnasium. Plastic chairs arranged in rows faced a folding table where council members sat with varying expressions of interest, skepticism, and support. Victor called the meeting to order, his demeanor markedly different from their previous encounter. "We're here to address several interconnected issues concerning Nash Greyhawk's property and the proposed Sunbelt development." From the back of the room, James Caldwell watched with barely concealed anger, flanked by suited men Gwen assumed were attorneys. Nash spoke first, his voice strong despite his fragile health. He outlined his vision for the healing center, connecting it to generations of tradition while emphasizing its modern relevance. "This is not about preserving the past for its own sake," he concluded. "It's about carrying forward knowledge that still has power to heal, alongside the best of modern medicine." Ben followed with a detailed explanation of the historical documents, projecting key pages on a screen for all to see. A murmur ran through the crowd as government promises and signatures became visible. Maya's presentation on legal implications was precise and powerful, her professional training evident in every carefully chosen word. These documents establish prior claims that supersede current ownership disputes. Moreover, they demonstrate significant financial obligations that were never fulfilled. When Gwen's turn came, She spoke not as an outsider, but as someone who had experienced the power of Nash's healing traditions firsthand. "I've practiced nursing for 20 years, she told the assembly. "I've seen modern medicine perform miracles, but I've also seen its limitations. What Nash offers is not an alternative to conventional healthcare, but a complement addressing aspects of healing that pills and procedures alone cannot reach." She presented letters of support from regional healthcare providers, including Dr. Wilson, who had agreed to serve as medical director if the center opened. As the presentations concluded, Victor opened the floor for community input. One by one, elders rose to speak, sharing stories of Nash's grandfather healing their parents, of traditional knowledge lost and found again, of concerns about water rights threatened by Sunbelt's plans. Clara Begay's testimony proved particularly powerful. "I can move my hands again," she declared, holding them up for all to see. "After Nash and Gwen treated me, I can bead again. Can your resort do that, Mr. Caldwell?" Caldwell demanded equal time, striding to the front with practiced confidence. His presentation was slick digital renderings of a luxurious resort, promising jobs, tax revenue, and cultural experiences. "Progress doesn't mean abandoning tradition," he insisted. "It means bringing tradition into the 21st century, sharing it with the world." Victor allowed him to finish before producing a document that silenced the Rumen official court summons. "Sunbelt Development has filed for an emergency injunction," Victor announced. "They're requesting immediate access to assess the Greyhawk property for environmental compliance and safety issues ahead of foreclosure." "A standard procedure," Caldwell interjected smoothly, "given the property's condition and reports of unauthorized healthcare activities." Maya stood immediately. "As Mr. Greyhawk's legal representative, I object to these characterizations and will be filing a counter-motion based on the historical documents presented today." Victor nodded. "The hearing is set for Monday morning. Until then, the council needs to decide its position." He turned to his fellow council members. "We'll deliberate and reconvene in 1 hour." Outside, Nash leaned against a wall, looking suddenly older. Gwen stepped close, checking his pulse discreetly. "I'm fine," he murmured. "You're exhausted," she corrected, "and your heart rate is elevated." Maya joined them, legal pad in hand. "We need to prepare for Monday. The judge assigned to the case is William Blackwood, known for being pro-development, but also a stickler for historical precedent." As they discussed strategy, Caldwell approached, attorneys flanking him like bodyguards. "A word in private, Mr. Greyhawk." His smile remained pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "One final opportunity to resolve this amicably." "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my family," Nash replied, his hand finding Gwen's in a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. Caldwell's smile tightened. "I know about your heart condition, Mr. Greyhawk, the stress of a court battle, the physical demands of your healing center. Is that really how you want to spend your remaining years?" The threat, veiled but unmistakable, hung in the air between them. "My health is not your concern," Nash replied evenly, "and your resort will never be built on my land." "We'll see about that." Caldwell nodded to his attorneys. "Monday morning, then?" When they returned to the ranch that evening, Nash's truck headlights swept across the property, revealing alarming changes. The front gate hung open, swinging on broken hinges. "Stay in the truck," Nash instructed, reaching under his seat for an old revolver. "Not a chance," Gwen replied, already opening her door. The house had been searched thoroughly, drawers upended, furniture displaced. Nash's medicine room was in disarray, but surprisingly, nothing appeared to be missing or damaged, just examined and carelessly replaced. "They were looking for the documents," Maya observed, helping to right an overturned bookshelf. "Or trying to intimidate us," Gwen added. Nash said nothing, moving methodically through rooms, checking hidden spaces known only to him. Finally, in his bedroom, he knelt and removed a floorboard, revealing a small cavity containing a cedar box. "Still here," he said with evident relief, showing them contents that included his most sacred ceremonial items and Sarah's wedding ring. That night, they took turns keeping watch. During Gwen's shift, she found Nash's medication untouched on his nightstand. "You didn't take your evening dose," she said, entering his room with the pills and a glass of water. Nash sat on the edge of his bed, looking at a photograph of Sarah. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm betraying her," he admitted, "fighting so hard to stay here without her." Gwen sat beside him, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "From everything you've told me about her, I think she'd be proud. You're protecting the land you shared, the vision you built together, and starting something new." Nash's gaze shifted to Gwen. "With someone new." The acknowledgement hung between them, neither willing to grasp it fully, both unable to let it go. "Take your medicine," Gwen said finally. "We have battles ahead." The next morning brought an official envelope containing the court summons. Maya read it with growing concern. "They're not just seeking inspection rights," she explained. "They're challenging Nash's competency to manage the property, citing his health issues and age as factors." "How would they know about his heart condition?" Gwen asked. "Dr. Wilson's office?" Ben suggested. "Or the hospital where I had tests," Nash added. "Regardless," Maya said, "we need to be prepared for them to use this against us in court." Gwen's phone chimed with an email notification. "It's from the Arizona Nursing Board," she announced, scanning the message. "Someone has filed a complaint against my license renewal, claiming I've been practicing without proper credentials." "Caldwell," Nash growled, "trying to discredit you." "It gets worse," Gwen continued reading. "They've specifically mentioned unauthorized treatments and exploitation of elderly patients." "Can they do that?" Ben asked. "They can try," Gwen replied, her jaw set. "But two can play at this game. I've documented everything we've done, all within scope of practice and traditional cultural contexts." Nash watched her with admiration. "You're a warrior." "No," Gwen corrected him with a small smile. "I'm a nurse who's had enough of bullies." Later that afternoon, Victor called with news from the emergency council session. "It's official," he reported. "The tribal council has voted to support your claim and provide legal assistance. We're also filing a separate action regarding the trust funds that should have been paid to both families." When the call ended, Nash stepped onto the porch, gazing toward the ancient petroglyphs on the canyon wall. "The ancestors are watching," he said softly as Gwen joined him. "I hope we prove worthy of their trust." The community center had never seen such a crowd. Tribal members filled every seat, lined the walls, and spilled onto the grounds outside, where a hastily arranged speaker system broadcast the proceedings. At the front, the tribal council sat at a long table, Victor at its center. Nash entered carrying a simple leather pouch, from which he withdrew an eagle feather, a sacred object rarely displayed publicly. A hush fell over the assembly. "I speak today not just for myself," Nash began, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "I speak for my father, who served this country as a code talker. For my grandfather, who healed this community when doctors wouldn't come to the reservation. For my children, and their children not yet born." He held the eagle feather high. "This was given to my grandfather by his grandfather. 5 generations it has passed from hand to hand, along with the knowledge of healing, of living in balance with the land. This is what Sunbelt would pave over for golf courses. This is what the bank would foreclose upon." As Nash continued, Gwen watched the faces in the crowd, elders nodding in solemn agreement, younger members leaning forward with growing interest, even those who had initially supported development now listening intently. Maya presented next, her legal expertise transforming dry documents into a compelling narrative of broken promises and legal obligations. She outlined their court strategy confidently, explaining how the historical agreements invalidated current claims against the property. When Gwen's turn came, she addressed the complaint against her nursing license directly. "Yes, I've been working with Nash to combine traditional healing with modern healthcare," she acknowledged. "Every treatment documented, every practice within legal scope. Sunbelt's complaint is not about protecting patients, it's about silencing opposition." She presented her vision for the Centera place where community members could receive both traditional healing and modern medical care, where younger generations could learn ancestral practices alongside contemporary healthcare. "This isn't about the past versus the future," she concluded. "It's about carrying forward the best of both worlds." Throughout the afternoon, community members rose to speak. Clara Begay described her improved mobility. A young mother testified about her colicky baby's relief. An elderly man recounted how Nash's father had saved his life during a snowstorm in the 1960s. Victor called for a vote as the sun began to set. The outcome was decisive. The tribe would formally support Nash's Healing Center vision and oppose Sunbelt's development. Furthermore, Victor announced, the council has unanimously voted to designate the Greyhawk property as a tribal cultural heritage site, affording it additional legal protections. The celebration that followed was tempered by reality. They still faced a court hearing Monday morning, and Sunbelt's resources far outweighed their own. Outside, as community members gathered in small groups, James Caldwell approached Nash directly. "Impressive performance," he said, his corporate smile firmly in place despite the defeat. "But Monday's hearing isn't before the tribal council. It's before Judge Blackwood, who understands economic reality." "The law is the law," Nash replied calmly, "even for Sunbelt. Laws can be interpreted many ways." Caldwell's smile thinned, especially when the opposing party might not be competent to represent his interests. Maya stepped forward. "Any attempt to question my father's competency will be met with medical evidence to the contrary and countersuits for defamation. And any attempt to discredit my nursing practice will backfire spectacularly." Gwen added, "I've already filed a formal ethics complaint regarding patient privacy violations in obtaining Nash's medical information." Caldwell's facade cracked slightly. "This isn't over." "On that we agree," Nash said quietly. The celebration continued at Nash's property, where community members brought food, music, and offers of help. Young people volunteered to repair fences, elders promised to share healing knowledge, and several local healthcare providers expressed interest in affiliating with the center. As the gathering wound down, Nash suddenly clutched his chest, gasping for breath. He collapsed before Gwen could reach him. "Nash," her nurse's training took over as she knelt beside him. "Someone call an ambulance." Maya watched in horror as Gwen performed a rapid assessment, checking pulse and breathing. "Dad!" she cried, dropping to her knees beside them. "He's breathing," Gwen assured her, already retrieving Nash's medication from her pocket. "Help me get him inside." With Ben's assistance, they carried Nash to his bedroom. By the time the ambulance arrived, his color had improved, but Gwen insisted on hospitalization. "Stress and exhaustion," the paramedic confirmed, "plus his existing cardiac condition. We'll take good care of him." As they loaded Nash into the ambulance, he grasped Gwen's hand. "The hearing," he whispered urgently, "Monday morning." "Don't worry about that now," she soothed. "Promise me," he insisted, his grip surprisingly strong. "Promise you'll be there. The land needs someone to speak for it." "I promise," Gwen said. "Now focus on getting better." After the ambulance departed, Maya, Ben, and Gwen stood in the suddenly quiet house, the celebration outside, dispersed by concern. "Will he be okay?" Maya asked, vulnerability replacing her professional composure. "He's strong," Gwen replied, hoping it was true. "But this fight is taking its toll." "Then we finish it for him," Maya said firmly. "Sunbelt doesn't know who they're dealing with." Nash was released from the hospital Sunday afternoon with strict orders to rest. The doctor's words echoed in Gwen's mind as she helped him into the house. Next time might be a heart attack. He needs to reduce stress immediately. Yet Monday morning found Nash insisting on attending the court hearing. "I won't hide while others fight my battles," he declared, though his complexion remained ashen. Gwen and Maya exchanged worried glances. "At least let us handle the presentation," Maya negotiated. "You be present, but conserve your strength." The courthouse in the county seat was an imposing sandstone building that had witnessed a century of territorial disputes. Inside, their small group found Ben, already conferring with the tribal attorney Victor, had arranged a sharp-featured woman named Diane Sosi, who had won several landmark cases involving native land rights. "The judge has agreed to review the historical documents," she informed them. "That's already a win. Sunbelt wanted them excluded as irrelevant." James Caldwell arrived with 3 attorneys and a court reporter, pointedly ignoring Nash's group as they arranged documents on their table. Judge Blackwood entered a stern-faced man in his 60s, whose reputation for meticulous procedure made him both feared and respected in legal circles. "This is a hearing on multiple motions," he began without preamble. Sunbelt Development seeks inspection access to the Greyhawk property and challenges the defendant's capacity to manage said property. The defendant counters with historical documents allegedly establishing prior federal agreements. Let's proceed efficiently. Sunbelt's attorneys presented first, arguing that Nash's property presented environmental hazards requiring immediate assessment, and questioning whether Nash's age and health made him competent to address these issues. Furthermore, their lead attorney concluded, Mr. Greyhawk has been allowing unauthorized healthcare practices on the property, conducted by Ms. Mallory, whose nursing license renewal is currently under investigation. Diane Sozi rose with calm confidence. Your Honor, these allegations are transparent attempts to circumvent the legal issue at the heart of this case, the valid prior claim established by federal agreements with Mr. Greyhawk's father and the tribal council during World War II. She methodically presented the historical documents, explaining their significance and the government's unfulfilled obligations. Maya followed with legal precedents supporting their position, her professional delivery belying her personal stake in the outcome. When Gwen's turn came, she addressed the complaints against her nursing practice directly. Your Honor, I've practiced nursing for 20 years with an unblemished record. Every treatment provided at Mr. Greyhawk's property has been fully documented and falls within both my scope of practice and constitutionally protected traditional cultural healing activities. Throughout the proceedings, Nash sat silently, his dignified presence a reminder of what was truly at stake. The judge called a brief recess to review the documents. In the hallway, Nash stepped away to take his medication, and Caldwell approached Gwen. It's not too late to reconsider my offer, he said quietly. The health coordinator position at our wellness resort would be perfect for someone with your background and far less complicated than your current arrangement. I'm not interested, Gwen replied coldly. No? Caldwell's voice dropped further. Think about what you're choosing, Miss Mallory. A failing property owned by an elderly man with a serious heart condition. Even if you win today, how long before you're back in court settling his estate? The crude calculation in his eyes made Gwen's anger flare. Mr. Greyhawk's health is not a bargaining chip, and neither is my integrity. When court reconvened, Judge Blackwood's expression gave nothing away as he delivered his ruling. I find the historical documents presented by the defense to be potentially valid prior claims that must be properly adjudicated before any foreclosure or development can proceed. He peered over his glasses at Sunbelt's attorneys. The motion for immediate inspection is denied, pending full review of these historical agreements. A ripple of reaction passed through the courtroom, quickly silenced by the judge's sharp glance. Additionally, he continued, I'm ordering federal review of the compensation claims arising from these documents. Until such review is completed, all actions against the property are stayed. Relief washed over Nash's face, though he maintained his composed demeanor. Outside the courthouse, reporters from local papers and tribal media requested statements. Nash stood with quiet dignity, thanking the community for their support and reaffirming his commitment to building the healing center. As cameras flashed, a government sedan pulled up and a man in a crisp suit approached them, presenting a business card that identified him as Daniel Reeves, Department of Interior. Mr. Greyhawk? His official tone drew their attention. I've been assigned to investigate the claims regarding Project Eagle and the subsequent agreements with your father and Mr. Redhorse's father. He handed Nash an envelope bearing an official seal. This is formal recognition that the United States government is reviewing these claims and acknowledges the potential validity of the prior agreements. A full investigation will follow. Nash accepted the document with steady hands, though Gwen could see the emotion in his eyes. Caldwell watched from the courthouse steps, his expression thunderous as he conferred with his attorneys. When Nash's group departed, his gaze followed them with cold calculation. This isn't over, he muttered to his lead attorney. Find another approach. 3 months later, the healing center renovation was well underway. What had once been stakes marking a foundation was now a circular structure of adobe and timber, its walls rising steadily against the canyon backdrop. Community members arrived daily to help with construction, bringing food, materials, and support. Nash had recovered significantly, following his medication regimen under Gwen's watchful eye. His color had improved, and though he tired more easily than before, his spirit remained undiminished. The government investigation had proceeded with surprising efficiency, resulting in formal recognition of the historical agreements and a substantial settlement for both the Greyhawk and Red Horse families. The mortgage was paid off, with funds remaining for the healing center's completion. Maya had taken a leave of absence from her Phoenix firm to oversee the legal aspects of establishing the center as a non-profit entity. Her initial skepticism had transformed into genuine commitment, and her relationship with Nash had deepened through their shared work. On this particular evening, Nash and Gwen sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls with familiar glory. 3 months of working side by side, of shared purpose and growing feelings, had created something neither had expected to find at this stage of life. "Letter from the nursing board came today," Gwen said, sipping her cedar tea. "Complaint dismissed. My license is fully reinstated." "Never doubted it," Nash replied with a slight smile. "Truth has a way of prevailing." They sat in comfortable silence until Nash reached into his pocket and withdrew 2 small envelopes. "Train tickets," he explained, handing them to her. "One departing Friday, one returning the following week." He met her eyes directly. "Your choice." Gwen examined the tickets, understanding their significance. "My daughter's dissertation defense." "You should be there," Nash said simply. "Family matters." "And the return ticket?" "A question," he replied, "not an assumption." The simple gesture acknowledging her independence, while hoping for her return, touched Gwen deeply. 3 months ago, she might have seen it as pressure. Now she recognized it as respect. "The center will need a nurse administrator," she said carefully, "someone to bridge traditional and modern approaches." "It will," Nash agreed, his eyes holding hers. "But that's a professional consideration. There are personal ones too." "There are," Gwen acknowledged, her heart quickening despite her resolve to remain practical. "I'm not a young man," Nash continued. "I can't offer decades, but I can offer purpose, partnership, a chance to build something meaningful together." "I didn't come here looking for." Gwen hesitated, unsure how to name what had grown between them. "Neither did I," Nash replied. "Sometimes the Creator sends us exactly where we need to be, even when it feels like we've been left behind." He echoed his words from their first meeting, now laden with new meaning. The next morning found them at Desert Key Station, the place where their journey had begun. The same weathered bench awaited departing passengers, though now Gwen noticed small improvements, a fresh coat of paint, flowers planted along the walkway. "Victor's Community Improvement Project," Nash explained, following her gaze. "Amazing what's possible when people work together." As the train approached, Nash took her hand. "I'll be here when you return, if you return." "I will," Gwen said with certainty that surprised her. "My work here isn't finished." "Just the work?" Nash asked quietly. Gwen smiled, squeezing his hand. "No, not just the work." The train whistle announced its arrival, wheels screeching against the tracks. Around them, the few other passengers gathered their belongings, but Gwen and Nash remained still, hands linked in the morning sun. "I never expected this," Gwen admitted. "At 50, starting over seemed hard enough. Finding this seemed impossible." "Sarah used to say that healing happens when we stop fighting what is and start building what could be," Nash replied. "You helped me remember that." The conductor called for boarding. Gwen shouldered her bag, the same one that had been stolen and mysteriously returned months ago. As she stepped toward the train, Nash remained on the platform, a figure of dignity and patience against the desert backdrop. From the train window, she watched him standing exactly where she had first seen him, a silhouette carved by time and wisdom, eyes reflecting 7 decades of Apache resilience. Now, however, she saw something new in his posture: hope, possibility, a future neither had anticipated. As the train pulled away, Gwen touched the return ticket in her pocket. Unlike the outbound journey 3 months ago, this departure felt not like escape, but like a circle being drawn in that would bring her back to the place and the person who had offered far more than shelter on a desperate night, to the land that was beginning to feel like home.